It feels like everyone's favorite Red Echidna is popping off right now with the imminent launch of his very own live-action, high-budget TV show on Paramount Plus. In fact, following Idris Elba's Drax-esque portrayal of Knuckles in Paramount's Sonic the Hedgehog 2, I'd say the character has probably never been so globally well known outside of the Sonic fanbase as he is right at this moment. But Knuckles the Echidna, the TV show, isn't the first time the famed Echidna warrior has taken center stage. Sure, there have been ample comic book solo outings, but what I'm talking about in this video is Knuckles CHAOTIX, a 2D classic Sonic-style platformer released in 1995 on Sega's short-lived 32X Mega Drive add-on, starring Knuckles the Echidna. Despite releasing around the time of peak 90s Sonic popularity, CHAOTIX is a relatively obscure title. The 32X was a commercial failure, and reception to the game at the time was mixed at best. And despite all other classic Sonic titles of that era getting re-released a billion times on every platform imaginable, for whatever reason, CHAOTIX has never seen a re-release. I've been a huge fan of Sonic since 1991, but up until now, I have never played CHAOTIX. It's the only major game in the series to completely pass me by. I never owned a 32X, I jumped straight to the Saturn, but I always figured Sega would re-release CHAOTIX in an official capacity at some point, so I'd hold off, and when they did re-release it, I'd play the shit out of it. But no, it never happened, which raises a couple of questions for me. Could it really be that it's a game so shit that a re-release would damage the Sonic brand for years to come? Or is there some other reason? Well, in this video, I'm going to try and find the answers to those questions myself. I'll finally be playing through and reviewing Knuckles CHAOTIX for the very first time, emulated via Steam Deck. You forced my hand, Sega. I'm super excited to finally have a go at the only arguably mainline Sonic release that I've never ever played, until now. It's been almost 20 years at the time of making this video, so let's dive into Knuckles CHAOTIX. First of all, it's worth pointing out that although I never played the game back in the day, I knew the CHAOTIX cast very well. There are 4 main playable characters in addition to Knuckles. We'll talk about these 2 assholes later on. And they are Mighty the Armadillo, who previously made his debut in 1993's Sega Sonic the arcade game, Vector the Crocodile, a scrapped character from 1991's Sonic the Hedgehog, who appeared as a band member of Sonic's also scrapped band, Charmy B, who originally appeared in a May 1992 Sonic manga in Japan, and Espio the Chameleon, who was created from scratch for this game. If you're going from the game's storyline, this group of lads basically all came to have a look at what Robotnik was up to before getting captured by him, then freed by Knuckles, and then they teamed up to take on their enemy, basically. If you're a British person, around my age, who was into Sonic though, CHAOTIX were much more than that. To us STC readers, CHAOTIX were the guardians of the Special Zone, a group of protectors. Vector was their level-headed leader, combining both brains and brawn. Mighty was the strongman of the crew, who had an ongoing rivalry with Espio, another capable fighter, who was more of a spy and tended to fight with his stealth chameleon abilities. Finally, there was Charmy B, who was loud, annoying, and talked a lot of nonsense and was also a prince for some reason, and a bee. Finally, in this interpretation, the group was rounded out with Knack the Weasel, or Fang the Sniper to the Japanese audiences, who was a career criminal and a member of CHAOTIX for a while until he betrayed them and became a foe. Although I knew back then that Fleetway had taken some liberties with the characters and their backstories for the UK comic interpretation, I didn't care. I loved these characters, their personalities, their designs. They were instantly appealing to me. They looked cool as fuck. I've known and enjoyed these characters for a long time, is my point, I think. I feel they meant a lot to Sonic fans in Britain back in the day, even if you'd never played the game. Anyway, back to the game. The plot to CHAOTIX is not clear if you go off the in-game cutscenes alone, so let's go old school and consult the manual for more guidance. It's also worth pointing out that the Japanese and Western versions have slightly different stories. As I live in the UK, I'll read the Western story, but according to Sonic writer Ian Flynn, the game is presumed non-canon now anyway, as the CHAOTIX were reinvented as a 3-piece detective agency in the 2003 game Sonic Heroes. So I guess the story, what little there is here, doesn't matter too much anymore, but here's what the manual says. Carnival Island's in chaos. Tomorrow's the big opening day for Carnival Island, a huge amusement resort with the latest in high-tech rides and games. As a guardian of the island, it's Knuckles' job to make sure nothing goes wrong before the grand event. Unfortunately, the evil Dr. Robotnik has other plans. He needs fuel for his latest diabolical devices, and the power emerald that supplies electricity to the entire island fits the bill perfectly. Wait, so he's built this on Angel Island? I'll be honest, I haven't paid any attention to the plot before reading this. Anyway, when Knuckles returns from patrolling the far end of the island, he discovers that Dr. Robotnik has imprisoned all of his friends: Espio the Chameleon, Mighty the Armadillo, Vector the Crocodile, and Charmy B. After he chases the Doctor off, Knuckles discovers that he can only rescue one friend at a time by using the ring power. Only the power that sparks between the rings holds the two partners together like a magical rubber band. As Dr. Robotnik drains the power from Carnival Island, everything on the island begins to break down. Robotnik must be stopped, or by tomorrow morning, the morning of the Carnival Island's big opening day, the grand amusement park will lie in ruins. It's not mentioned here, by the way, but in addition to Robotnik, Metal Sonic makes a return as a primary antagonist, which is always nice to see. Anyway, we won't go into the story anymore. It's real bare bones in the game, and it's non-canon now anyway, apparently. Knuckles Chaotix is a lovely looking game a lot of the time. All the stages are bright and colourful, and I felt like I was being blasted in the face and eyes by a distinctly 90s aesthetic throughout my time playing, which I guess is due to its combination of pointy and square shapes and vibrant colours. The whole thing screamed radical, in a way that only the 1990s can. I really like the visual style they went for with this one. It really pops. Chaotix is set in an amusement park, which I feel makes it stand apart from the locations of the other classic 2D Sonic games of the era. It definitely has its own look when compared to the rest of the series. A downside to this setting, however, is that I did find some of the stages felt a bit samey visually. Going off the top of my head, the ones that stood out to me as feeling more unique were Botanic Base due to its abundance of plant life, and the Marina Madness, as there were just a shitload of boats all over the place. No other stages had that. Some of the others merged together in my mind, almost like comparing a stage from Sonic Mania with its Sonic Mania Plus recolor in the Encore mode at times. Perhaps on a few more playthroughs though, I'll find more to distinguish them from each other. But I felt they're less distinct than your typical ice level, lava level, water level, etc. Maybe it could be argued it's refreshing in a way though. Let's talk the characters. The sprites look great and are probably the most detailed of any 2D Sonic game up until this point in 1995. There's a lot of shading and lighting being cast on them, which gives them a sense of depth and 3D-ness. More so than the previous Sonic entries. I guess that's down to the awesome power of the 32X. And I love the various animations the characters do when they complete the stage or when they're idle. Knuckles crouches down and spins a ring on his finger, for example, and Vector has a little dance to the music in his headphones. Which is nice. Where the game can get ugly is with some of the brief but recurring sprite scaling. Certain power-ups cause your character to grow or shrink, and when your character has the big power-up, they are a huge blocky mess. This also happens when you press the button to recall your secondary character. They zoom up to the screen for a moment, and once again, it's an ugly block of Palooza. A strange design decision.
IMO.
But this aside, it generally looks great. The title screen is cool as fuck too. Look at this bunch of lads. And the game features mid-level animated cutscenes in a way the series hadn't up until this point, which is a welcome addition. Overall, visually lovely and a unique entry in many ways. It's pretty easy on the eyes. At first glance, this may look like a standard 2D Sonic game, but in an attempt to mix up the formula, the team behind Chaotix introduced a new gimmick. You play as two characters. One primary, which you control, as well as a support character, and each are holding a ring which keeps them tethered together with a stretchy, bungee-like energy cord thing. This can be stretched out in different ways to slingshot characters off each other, allowing them to reach super fast speeds, activate switches, access hard-to-reach areas, and so on. You can pick up and throw the other characters too, which helps with accessing high areas, or if you just want to lob them into an enemy or a boss. The bungee cord is an interesting new gimmick and kind of fun. It takes a little while to get to grips with, but once you've got it down, you can pull off some pretty cool shit, and it's satisfying to use. Maybe it's a skill issue, but for me it never quite stopped being a little too bonkers and unpredictable at times. Chaotic, if you will. Still, if it's ever going a bit too nuts, or if a character gets stuck somewhere, you can instantly recall them to your position at the press of a button, which leaves you with control of an individual character for a brief moment, just enough time for you to get your shit together. You can choose to play as any primary character you wish, except for Heavy and Bomb, and then the support character you're paired with is decided by a UFO catcher machine in a pre-level hub world. You can attempt to grab your preferred character, but you've got to have pretty good timing and a bit of luck to get the one you want. Each character has their own moves too. Firstly, they all jump and spin dash, except for Charmy, and Knuckles glides and climbs walls as usual. Standard Knuckles stuff. Vector can climb walls too, and also do a power boost through the air, which gives the player an instant blast of speed. Mighty can jump on walls and kick off them, or jump up them. Espio can run up walls and along ceilings, and has his own variation of the spin attack, and Charmy, being a bee and all, flies instead of jumps. He's the most overpowered of the bunch, and he makes traversing the more vertical levels extremely easy. In addition to these fellas are two duds, Heavy and Bomb, two robotic defectors who joined Knuckles and the gang but are likely still working for the enemy undercover. Heavy is slow and, well, heavy, and Bomb explodes sometimes. These two are a burden to be paired with and best avoided if possible. I'd probably say my favourite character to play as is Vector, as his power boost gives an instant massive boost of speed. And Charmy is good if you're taking on a more difficult to navigate stage near the end and you're in a fuck this shit, I'm just flying through the whole thing to get it done kind of mood. But you really can't pick the best character for each stage ahead of time, as CHAOTIX does not progress in the usual linear fashion of classic Sonic games. Instead, the order of the levels is selected at random following the push of a switch, after selecting your characters from the UFO catcher. When all stages and bosses are finally completed, you'll move on to the endgame boss. And if you get to the endgame with all 6 Chaos Rings, you'll get the true ending. Something I'd recommend, as the non-Chaos Rings ending is pretty damn bleak. Anyway, more on this in a bit. This random level selection means that each playthrough of CHAOTIX can feel pretty unique, but it's also a little odd hopping from one stage aesthetic to another at random and bouncing back to a central point between each level. The levels themselves are pretty large, and I found them to have more emphasis on exploring, both horizontally and vertically, than your traditional point A to point B Sonic stage. I guess it's a little more like the larger stages in Sonic CD. Some levels are pretty straightforward, but some are easy to get lost in with no obvious signposting of where to go. I definitely prefer the shorter, more straightforward ones, where you can really get up some well-earned speed with the bungee and just tear through them. It can be a real buzz. There's still fun to be had with the larger levels though, as they give you ample room and time to fanny about and have fun with the bungee mechanic. It can be both fun and frustrating as you try to progress through these stages, using this zany mechanic to navigate the terrain. Overall, I can say I was having a good time at least 70 to 80% of the time. The other times, I was feeling mild to moderate frustration as I found myself unable to access areas, usually because I was paired with a dud character, or I was just baffled trying to find the end of a stage. There aren't many badniks or hazards in this game compared with your typical 2D Sonic title, as your main objective is using the bungee to overcome the stage layouts, which is fine and fun enough, and as mentioned, can work well. But sometimes this can mean these large stages can feel a little empty. In addition to all of this are 3D special stages, accessed by finishing a stage with 50 rings. Here you can have a go at nabbing yourself a Chaos Ring, by collecting a set number of blue spheres within the time limit and without falling off the stage. These areas see you running around 3D hexagonal tubes and other mad terrain littered with obstacles. A great special stage design in principle, IMO. But the technical limitations cause some problem with pop-up not leaving you much time to react to what's coming up. You'll approach what looks like a massive hole and then, boom, more floor appears, you're fine. But then at other times, the floor doesn't appear. Still good overall, but fuck me do they get brutally difficult when trying to get the last couple of rings. Although I may just be saying this as a newcomer to the game, if I'd played this 50 million times and mastered it as a child like I have with past Sonic games, maybe they'd be committed to muscle memory and they'd be as much of a breeze as most of the other 2D Sonic special stages. Anyway, it's worth getting these rings if you can before facing off against the nightmarish Metal Sonic Kai, unless you're happy with the bleak ending of a burning city. Although this game features a lot of staple Sonic sound effects you'd expect from the series, it feels quieter for some reason. I found that there were long periods of relative silence when playing, apart from the jumping sounds and background music. Maybe it's because there's less emphasis on the spin attack, so there aren't those saw sounds that Sonic usually makes. In fact, I don't think the characters in this game make that noise. But also there are fewer sound effects in general as far as I recall. For example, in the final Metal Sonic Kai boss fight, his laser blasts don't make any noise at all. I thought this may have been an emulation issue, so I went and watched some footage on YouTube, but it was the same there, so I can only assume this is how it's supposed to sound. When this is paired with fewer badniks, power-ups without their own accompanying music, and a relatively mellow soundtrack, it makes for a game that is quieter and more chilled out in the audio department to what I'm used to. Speaking of the soundtrack though, it is superb. I love it, and it needs a digital release. Get it on streaming platforms, SEGA! I feel like I may have thrown a fair bit of shade at this game in this review, but don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed my time with CHAOTIX overall. It's sometimes clunky, sure, some of the levels can be large and confusing at times too, but ultimately it's a solid platforming game, and I commend the team on trying to do something new with the series. Mastering the bungee mechanic can feel hugely rewarding when you pull it off correctly, and the zany unpredictability of it at times are all part of the fun. It's a pretty wacky game. The random order of the levels and pairing of the characters makes for a unique playthrough each time, and the CHAOTIX are cool as fuck. The game could have ditched Heavy and Bomb though, and nothing of value would have been lost. I love the art style and the music, and would highly recommend 2D Sonic fans give it a go, if you can. Which brings me back to my questions from the start of the video regarding a potential re-release. Could it really be that it's a game so shit that a re-release would damage the Sonic brand for years to come, or is there some other reason? Well, after playing it, I can only speculate that, at a time when SEGA are continuously, and successfully IMO, trying to rebuild the brand's image, they feel that such a wild and occasionally clunky game would not score particularly well with your average reviewer. That could be one reason, but that wouldn't make sense as to why it couldn't have been an added bonus packaged with Sonic Origins Plus. Another thing SEGA are doing right now is trying to establish a consistent Sonic backstory, and maybe they think that the re-release of this, a game considered non-canon, could potentially damage that. If that is the case though, I still can't see any reason as to why these characters couldn't have met years ago, then years later formed a detective agency and they just haven't mentioned the events that happened briefly 20 years ago. Anyway, who knows? SEGA, re-release CHAOTIX. Come on. Thank you so much for watching this video. It's been interesting reviewing a classic Sonic game that I'd never played before in the modern age as an adult. I can't help but wonder if I played this loads as a kid and knew it inside out like I do the other classic Sonic games, would it be a timeless, flawless classic to me? Or would I feel the same way about it being a bit clunky and zany? I want to say the latter. It's good, but it's not on the same level as the classic Sonic games. But I do recommend it. Have you played CHAOTIX? What did you think of it? Would you welcome a re-release, or do you think CHAOTIX should stay buried? Where and when did you experience CHAOTIX for the first time? Either the characters or the game? Let me know in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video and subscribe if you haven't yet. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.